face, I say hello, 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 hello. You can't do what I do, that's just something you don't. I make this look easy from the way that I talk. On dimension, I be turning suckers.
Hey, what's up guys, TechTitan here, and this is the comparison between the Galaxy A14 5G and the Galaxy A15 5G. And the big question here is that, is the A15 worth the upgrade from the A14? So we have a lot to cover. Sit back, enjoy, stay subscribed, and if you like this video, that's much appreciated. So yeah, let's go ahead and begin. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the design, beginning with the Galaxy A14 5G. So the Galaxy A14 5G is made entirely out of plastic, other than the display of course, which again is not really, which obviously it's not really a bad thing considering the price of this phone, but the back did have this kind of textured material that's supposed to help with the grip, but it doesn't really. It is made entirely out of plastic. The back also has your triple camera setup with your LED flash, which we will definitely talk about a little bit more in depth. And also the back has this textured material, and if you look even closer, the Samsung logo itself has kind of this indentation and a little bit of texture to it, which is a nice touch from Samsung. The bottom has your ports, which is your USB-C, your headphone jack, your bottom facing speaker, and a microphone. But my biggest thing when it comes to the design of this phone is the durability. So this phone felt really fragile, and the back seemed like it was going to snap off at any moment, which is not a really good look. Now the right hand side did have the power button that doubles as a fingerprint sensor and your volume up and down. The buttons were not really that clicky or tactile. But yeah, I mean, that's the basic story of the Galaxy A14 5G's design. Now, the A15 5G introduced couple of new things when it comes to the design. The first being this kind of matte finish on the back, which made it really slippery. Way more slippery than the A14 5G, but that's okay. The price is still the same. And I would say that this phone, as far as durability, is much more durable. And to me, I feel like it is a more of a solid look than the A14 5G, just because it does have this kind of, I would say, multi-tone color. So if it's under regular light, it would show up as blue, but under bright light, the color kind of shifts from this light blue to a darker blue, which is a cool look. Again, this matte finish is really slippery, so keep that in mind. Now, the back of the phone does have a triple camera setup as well, but there is an improvement in the camera department, which we will discuss in the camera review. So if you want to look at the right hand side, you do also get your power button that again doubles as a fingerprint sensor, as well as your volume up and down. I would say that the volume up and down is a little bit more clickier than the A14 5G, but the power button itself is not so much. So there is this kind of indentation at the right hand side that I would say differentiates just the side of the phone, and it kind of curves up to the power button and the volume up and down. It's a cool look, but it's not really that practical, and I said that in my 48-hour review of this phone. Basically, my problem with it is that it makes it even more difficult for me to determine where the power button versus that kind of curve is at, so it wasn't really as easy to click as the A14 5G. So as far as your connectors go, on the bottom you do have your 25-watt USB-C port, a headphone jack, and your bottom facing speaker, as well as the microphone. So putting these phones side by side, it will give you a better look. In my opinion, I would say as far as the material of choice, well, obviously they're both made out of plastic, but the utilization of plastic on the A15 5G is better than the A14 5G. Specifically, I would say in a durability point of view. Now, as far as like looks itself, obviously this is just a subjective topic, but I prefer the A15 over the A14. And keep in mind also that the A14 is slightly taller than the A15 5G, so that might go into your purchasing decision. It's not that significant, but it's noticeable. And the other thing that I want to talk about, if we have these phones side by side, is that the materials where the back goes. So the back of the A14, like I said, does have textures versus this kind of smooth finish on the A15. Now, obviously, the A15 looks better, but it is more slippery. So looking at the power button and the volume up and down, like I said, I would say that the A15's volume rockers are a little bit more tactile than the A14's. However, I don't really like the way that they designed it on the A15 with this curve. So the bottom of both of these phones, you will also notice that the A15 has more of a squared off flat finish on the sides versus the curves on the A14. I feel like the flat finish provides a better grip. But then again, like I mentioned a couple of times already, They're both slippery. The A15 is a little bit more slippery, but the A15 seems a little bit thinner and much more manageable to hold in hand, and I would say a little bit more comfortable. So yeah, that's basically the comparison of the design. You tell me which one you would prefer. I would say the A15 has the A14 beat in the design department. All right, so switching topic of conversation, let's talk about the display. So the most impressive thing about this A14 5G is its display. So it has a 6.6-inch 1080p IPS LCD panel. And we all know what Samsung can do when it comes to displays, so this one here is no exception. This is a very, very solid display. Like I said, obviously this is not an OLED display, but as far as quality, it's there. So it's plenty sharp. It doesn't glare as much as the A15, as you guys will see in a little bit, and it also supports 90 Hz technology. So there's that for you. As far as the brightness goes, it's not going to be the greatest as far as brightness, but it's plenty bright in outdoor conditions. And as far as watching content, browsing the web, doing social media, whatever you want to do on your phone, it's going to be definitely an enjoyable experience. I didn't really have any issues when it comes to the display of this phone. Remember, you have to keep in mind that this is, at the end of the day, a $200 phone. So Samsung went above and beyond, in my opinion, when this phone came out, and I feel like that was the most impressive thing when it came to this phone. Now, changing the story a little bit, the A15 5G brought some immense improvements in the display department. So instead of using IPS panel, Samsung decided to give us kind of an upgrade and use an OLED display. So it gives you all the benefits of an OLED display as far as saturation, colors, even brightness. So this phone is brighter than the A14 on paper, so it does have a up to 400 nits of peak brightness. It is slightly smaller at 6.5 inches though, but this phone also has support for a 120 Hz refresh rate, which is fantastic, and that's definitely a solid upgrade. I thought that they would go ahead and get rid of the kind of high refresh rate if they were to put an OLED display, but they kept it, and they kept the amazing price. But it's not all sunshine and roses. So the biggest problem that I have with this phone is the glaring issue. So it doesn't really have an anti-glare coating, which can get annoying if you're, I would say, in indoor conditions or the sun is bright outside. The display might be harder to see, even though it's still plenty bright, but it still might be harder to see because of this glaring problem. But overall, like I said, I mean, watching videos, browsing the web, going through social media, and just using your phone on the daily, this display is fantastic by all means. For a $200 phone, Samsung again this year went above and beyond, and this would be my display of choice, of course. Alright, so switching the topic of conversation, and let's talk a little bit about the camera setup. Beginning with the Galaxy A14 5G. So the Galaxy A14 has a triple camera setup with the following specs: a 50 megapixel main sensor, 2 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor, with the ability to record 1080p at 30 frames per second, and a front-facing camera of 13 megapixel, and the ability to record 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now, the camera quality is not going to be the greatest in the world, but again, that is to be expected. However, it did its job fairly well. The pictures on the A14 did look a little bit dimmer, so they were missing this saturation that we would love to see from Samsung, but still, in good lighting conditions, it did decent. However, in some scenarios, when it comes to kind of the bokeh effect, it did miss focus here and there, but that's okay. Overall though, as a camera for the $200 price point, it's fine. The indoor photography on the Galaxy A14 5G was also slightly worse, but it did its job fairly well. Again, the main story here is that a lot of the pictures did look dim. The selfie camera is okay, but again, it's nothing to write home about, and the 1080p video capability of this phone is kind of, I would say it's more of an upscaled 720p or even lower. But again, it did its job. It did a decent job in focusing on subjects, so I guess it gets a thumbs up for that, but it's not going to be the greatest camera. Now, the A15 5G did bring us some notable upgrades, beginning with the triple camera setup. Again, it's a 50 megapixel main sensor, but however, this time around they did provide with an ultra wide sensor, and you still get that macro sensor. Okay, as far as the picture quality goes on the Galaxy A15 5G, here's the difference that you can see. So the colors look slightly better on the A15 versus the A14. The sharpness is more noticeable. And the camera here provides a little bit more vibrance in some scenarios. Other scenarios it does not, which is weird. But yeah, in good lighting conditions, again, expect decent pictures, but expect decent pictures for 200 bucks. The wide angle lens is fun, but it is noticeably lower in quality. As far as other pictures where I found that the vibrance is not there, for example, this picture here, you can tell that the colors don't look as popping or as good as previous picture. However, though, overall as a package, there's definitely a slight improvement in the color department, in the saturation, in the vibrance department, even in exposure. And focusing on here is well, it does well for the most part. In some scenarios it does miss focus, but in others it does a really good job in that department. And you can also clearly tell that Samsung did spend a little bit of time in making the picture quality better than the A14 5G. So like I said, and like I mentioned before, there is more saturation, the pictures pop a little bit more. Even the dynamic range on here is noticeably better. Now, low light on both of these phones suck, but that's to be expected. However, if I were to go for a camera and I have the A14 and the A15 side by side, the A15 wins that competition every single time. As far as the video capability, I would say it is noticeably better. It looks a little bit more like a 1080p than the A14 5G's camera, and the focusing on here is quick, snappy, so the video capability is definitely something to consider. As far as the A15's camera goes, it looks better than the A14. It only caps at 30 frames per second. There's no optical image stabilization or 60 frames per second video recording, but that's okay. And the bokeh effect when you get close to your subject is really good. It was actually surprisingly good, so thumbs up for that. So overall though, the Galaxy A15 5G did bring some respected and much needed improvements to the camera quality of versus the A14 5G. So better dynamic range, better video capability, and better pictures in good lighting conditions. And basically that's the story behind the cameras on both of these devices. The A15 overall just does better job, and it does also provide you with a wide angle lens that is missing on the A14 5G. Now let's kind of shift this conversation and talk a little bit about the performance, beginning with the A14 5G. So the A14 has the following specs. So if you're in the United States, you get the MediaTek Dimensity 700 based on 7nm architecture. It is octa-core, and it does have the Mali G57 GPU. It does also have 4GB of RAM as well as 64GB of storage, a 5000 mAh battery, as well as the ability to charge up to 15 watts of fast charging. Now, when it comes to the daily tasks, they're fine on the phone. Overall, after a period of time, I would say after like 6-7 months, I did notice this phone slowing down. There wasn't really a big heating problem, but keep in mind that these are kind of low specs, so it's not going to be the greatest processor. As far as your Geekbench score, this phone did give me scores that I expected. So a 527 in the single core and 1697 in the multi-core, which are good scores for a $200 device that is unlocked MSRP. So when it comes to the actual performance, like what I use the phone for, the daily tasks, browsing the web, going through social medias, it's fine. It did hiccup here and there, but it wasn't like to a point where it gets you frustrated or you just don't want to use the phone no more. It was fine. It did its job fine. Heavy demanding games, you will see noticeable slowdowns and the phone will crash a little bit more, of course, but that's just the price that you would pay. Okay, so switching the page to the Galaxy A15 5G, the difference in story is this. So this phone also uses an octa-core MediaTek processor. However, it upgrades a couple of things. First of all, the Geekbench is noticeably improved. So a 698 on the single core and 1882 on the multi-core, which is much better than the A14 5G. The daily tasks did seem faster, but maybe that's also thanks to the 120Hz refresh rate. So they work together to give you I would say, a better experience in my opinion. Playing more heavy demanding games is slightly better on the A15 5G, and the A15 does support more storage, so 128GB of standard storage, 4GB of RAM, 5000 mAh battery, and a faster charging speeds of 25 watts, which is thumbs up for that. So the performance aspect, there is definitely improvement in the A15 versus the A14. Putting these phones side by side, here's what we will see. So opening up the daily apps like the phone app, the messaging app, and just like your basic apps, it's gonna be pretty much the same. So nothing too drastic of a difference here. Where I would say you will really notice the difference is when it comes to more heavy demanding games and stuff that will use a lot of the RAM and actually take advantage of the processing power. That's when you'll see the improved version of the A15 versus the A14. So here's my conclusion on the bottom line for you. Me personally, I think the A15 brings in some notable and respectable improvements versus the A14. It brings in a more durable design, in my opinion, a better looking phone. And of course it does have the improvement of the OLED panel versus the IPS panel, even though it does have a glaring issue. And it brings in even faster charging capability, an improved camera system, as well as a faster charging system. So with that being said, I mean, in the comments below, tell me what you guys think. Do you think that it's worth the upgrade? In my opinion, it is. Okay, if you have the A14, it is worth the upgrade, but I wouldn't rush to it, right? Wait until you get more promos, but 200 bucks is actually a pretty nice value for this phone. So in the comments below, tell me what you think. Do you think the A15 is a better upgrade? Not so much. I want to hear from you guys. So with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will definitely catch you guys in newer comparisons, different comparisons. So a lot more cool videos are coming on the A15, so be on the lookout. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.